special Q&AUJS, our very first Q&AUJS edition. The topic this evening is going to be stopping the spread. Tonight, I have with me three incredible and experienced panelists. I have Dr. Mike Freelander, the Labor member for the federal seat of Macarthur and a paediatrician. I have Julian Leeser, MP, Liberal member for Berowra, the only non-doctor on the panel, but we still very much appreciate his input. And Kerryn Phelps, City of Sydney councillor, GP, and former AMA president, who also happens to be my mother. Please welcome our incredible panelists.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
Okay, thank you guys so much for joining. Just to anyone who is watching live, please remember that you can put in any questions that you have into the questions section, the comment section of our live post. I am the New South Wales Political Affairs Director for the Australasian Union of Jewish Students, Gabby Stricker-Phelps, and let's get into it because we've only got an hour. So our first question this evening is, what is one thing that you think Australia is doing well and one thing that we should be doing better in terms of our response to COVID-19? Dr. Freelander, let's start with you.
Well, I think we've done a number of things pretty well and leave us pretty well placed. I think our medical preparedness is about as good as any country in the world. It's not going to be perfect. There are obviously shortages of some personal protective equipment, etc., and face masks. But I think we owe a debt of gratitude to our senior health bureaucrats for having us as well prepared as we are. So I think that's something that we've certainly done very well.
Mm. Kerryn, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, obviously from the medical point of view, I would have to agree with Mike that our hospitals, our doctors are planning for surge capacity in our hospitals as well as I think anywhere in the world. We, of course, had some advanced knowledge about what was likely to happen. And so we've been able to look at doing things like closing down elective surgery in private hospitals so that can open up intensive care unit beds, anaesthetists, skilled staff to be able to look after people. We also are able to bring in ventilators so that people who require intensive care or high dependency care will be able to have a better chance of survival if they do end up on needing a ventilator, that there will be a ventilator and staff to be able to do that. So I think in terms of caring for people with the virus also, that Australia's health system will enable that.
Mm. And Julian, anything to add there?
Well, look, I concur with everything that Mike and Kerryn have said about our medical practitioners and our health system. One of the things that the health minister talks about regularly about where Australia is done very well is in the number of tests we've performed. We've got one of the highest number of tests per capita in the world. I think we've got over 200,000 tests. I think yesterday I saw the figures, and of course these change every day, so it's always difficult to use yesterday's figures. But I think we had higher per capita results than Canada, South Korea, both of which have been well regarded in international discussions about coronavirus, and even the UK. And I think one of the challenges that the UK is facing is that they haven't rolled out their testing regime quickly enough. So I think we should be very proud of our doctors. I think we should be very proud of the way the country has come together on this. I've been talking to the school principals in my electorate, just giving them a call over the last few days. And what's amazed me in both the non-government schools, but in the government schools as well, how quickly people have just adjusted and put together the online learning environment. I mean, this is the sort of thing that I'd have thought might have taken us, months, years to get up and running, and reasonably seamlessly. There are obviously speed humps in every community and every situation, but overall, the rollout has been just tremendous.
Mm-hmm. And what do we need to be doing better?
Do you want me to start on that one?
Yeah, please.
Look, I think we've got better at social isolation, but there's still more to do. And you can see the draconian, I think quite draconian, but necessary measures that the state governments have put in place in relation to people who are not properly observing the social isolation rules. The fact that we still have, a reasonably large growth, particularly among younger people, which I think we're going to come to a bit later, is a real issue. I don't know what more we can do to say to people that this is serious. And when governments say to you, and when we can have a multi-partisan panel like this one, and people say social isolation is absolutely necessary, that people should pay proper attention to it and heed the fact that, you shouldn't go out except for exercise. You shouldn't go out unless you've got medical appointments. You shouldn't go out unless you've got to go to the shops or go to work. And you should otherwise just be at home. And that's a message that we really need people to heed.
Did anyone want to add anything on that? Otherwise, I've got a question that's just come in live.
I'll add to that, Gabby. I think what we need to get better at is communicating clear messages, because people are telling me that they've been very confused about some of the messages that have been coming out from the government. And so that very clear, concise, very credible messaging needs to happen on a regular basis, so that people are not confused about whether it's okay to go to a football match or not, whether it's okay to go to a party or not, whether it's okay to sit around in the park or not. And so those messages need to be very clearly articulated. And of course, we need to continue to explain why it is so important. And we do need to actually frighten people a little bit, because if they're not a little bit frightened about what could happen if we don't get this epidemic under control, or under better control than we have now, then they're not paying attention. The other thing that we have become better at, but still not perfect, is about border protection. Knowing that we had so many cases coming in from the US and Europe, and we were quite slow in closing those borders. We know about the cruise ship fiasco, that was a problem. And one thing we're going to have to get better at is getting adequate PPE, personal protective equipment, to the frontline healthcare workers, to make sure that they have all of the equipment they need, world's best practice, so that they can protect themselves.
Yeah, and on that, we've just had a question come in, and I might go to Dr. Freelander on that. The US is now being told to wear masks. Should we be following suit, considering they new cases are now from unknown sources? Do you think masks are the way to go?
Look, I think that the evidence about masks is a little bit equivocal. I think that we should be wearing masks if we're going out in public, if we have to. And some people will have to visit the chemist to pick up medication or see their GP or whatever. So I think that we will be coming to that point. One of the reasons why people were not being encouraged to wear masks all the time is because of shortages, and hopefully that will improve as we ramp up production in Australia and get more from overseas. So I think that if we can, then it's likely that we all should wear masks when we're out, when we have to go out. But if I can just add a little bit to what was said previously about what we're not doing so well, and I think the border protection is a huge issue. We had really terrible airport practices even up until the last few days. Now, it's good that they've cramped down, but unfortunately we did have the potential to really miss the boat there. And obviously the cruise ships are another huge issue. But I also believe our social distancing could have been much more effective if it was brought in earlier and it was more black and white. This idea that it was okay to go to the footy or that you could have meetings of 500 people, etc., led to a lot of mixed messages. Now, glad that we've become stricter, but I think we should be becoming stricter still. As far as I'm concerned, our schools should close. Maybe you could have one school in each district open and one preschool open for the people who have no alternative for childcare if they are working in essential services. But really, if we're going to have effective social distancing, our schools and preschools should close. Now, we've already seen, there was some myths spread around, or children don't get the virus, or children don't get particularly sick. We know that's not always the case. And, I'm aware of preschool close to my electorate that have had people with coronavirus and children with coronavirus. So I think they should close, and I think we should be very black and white about our social gathering and our social distancing around schools and preschools. I think what the government's done in terms of funding for preschools has been very good.
Yeah.
So people should enrol their kids, but I don't believe they should send them unless they absolutely have to.
Julian, as a member of Parliament, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Gabby. Look, I'm obviously not a doctor on the panel, but I think the first thing to say is that all the social distancing measures that have been taken on medical advice, on the advice of the health practitioners, Chief Medical Officers Committee, and that is a committee that's established with the Chief Medical Officer of the Commonwealth and of each of the states. I can't comment as to whether it's a good or a bad thing for schools to be closed. I think, as a non-doctor, I will just take the advice that's been given by the Chief Medical Officers. But I wanted to add perhaps an interesting point. So in my constituency, which is a reasonably high socioeconomic area of Sydney, most of the school principals that I've been talking to have a handful of students still attending the school. I'm also the chair of the House of Representatives Committee on Indigenous Affairs, and I was talking to the principal of a school that's predominantly Indigenous, not in my electorate. And that person said to me that 80% of students at that school, largely Indigenous students, were still attending the school until the time when the Prime Minister announced that effectively no gatherings of any more than 2 people. And the principal of the school said to me that unlike school students, say, in my electorate, where you've got parents who are able to supervise the educational needs in particularly disadvantaged communities, it will be much harder for parents to supervise and assist the learning of their children. And I think that is genuinely a real issue. Obviously, we must always put the health issues first, but the advice that we have from the Chief Medical Officers is that schools can still stay open.
I think that's modified advice, and I think that each electorate is different. But I think that really New South Wales Premier was very right when she suggested that people not send their kids to school. I think that was the right.
Okay, to shift the discussion a little bit now to symptoms of COVID-19. As a GP, Kerryn, this one's directed from Aaron from New South Wales to you. The symptoms of COVID-19 have varied from a mild cough and fever to being fatal. At what point should one go to their GP for help? And what response should we be looking or expecting from them?
In fact, the symptoms of coronavirus or COVID-19 will vary from no symptoms to life-threatening. And so the other thing that's quite confusing is that it is fairly non-specific in many cases. And so it could be like any number of the other viruses that are circulating at this time of year, like adenovirus, rhinovirus, influenza, and so forth. And so you're not going to know whether you have contracted coronavirus or not if you have, for example, a runny nose, a sore throat, aches and pains, a fever, a cough, because that could be the flu. I think the best thing people can do for themselves at the moment, of course, is to get a flu vaccine to protect themselves against the flu so that we don't have a double epidemic. But in terms of coronavirus, we are not encouraging people to go to their general practitioner at all. We're encouraging them when they have symptoms like this. What we are doing is encouraging them to phone their GP. Many of us in our practices are now providing telehealth services, so we can do a triaging by phone to talk to people about their symptoms and then to navigate them to where they need to go to have COVID testing. Now, if there are some red flag type symptoms where you will need to be directed to hospital, and your GP can help to assess that. And that will be if you are feeling extreme fatigue, if you are very unwell, if you have any breathlessness. These are the sorts of symptoms that would send you probably directly to hospital, but via a phone call with your GP to make sure that that the road was made smooth for you to be told where to go and for the hospital to be alerted to you coming so that they could be prepared for the possibility that you might have the coronavirus. again, to protect other patients and staff at the hospital. It's not wise to turn up to the GP with those symptoms because that could then put the general practice at risk.
Does anyone want to add to that, or?
There's some really interesting things that they're finding about coronavirus now. There's lots we have to learn about it. But one thing they've noted is the very early symptoms are often loss of taste and loss of smell. So it can be an early sign, together with or without fever and the other symptoms that Kerryn mentioned. And for many people, it's thought they may well be asymptomatic. They may not have any symptoms at all. So that's where community testing will become part of our response, I suspect.
And speaking to a young audience, Julian, what is your message to young people in particular about stopping the spread?
Well, I think that the social distancing measures apply to young people as much as they apply to anyone else. That is the absolutely core message. It's not right to say that young people don't get COVID-19. They do. It's not right to say that young people don't die from COVID-19. They do. There was a 36-year-old Australian man in Iceland who died in recent days. When the New South Wales Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, spoke this morning, he talked about the very high levels of people who are not socially isolating in the sort of 20 to 29 age group, and the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in that age group in particular. So I think people need to think about this is not just a disease you can give to your grandmother or your grandfather and it be fatal for them. This is a disease that can make you very sick and can be potentially fatal for you as well.
I think that's really strong messaging. Does anyone else want to add?
Well, I agree with Julian that people of every age need to take this extremely seriously. It's not something that is just going to feel like a cold or feel like the flu. Certainly in the more severe cases, we're hearing of very severe symptoms and obviously in some cases, and we can't pick necessarily who are going to be the people who will have life-threatening coronavirus infections, who is likely to die. But you want to avoid being that person who becomes so unwell that they need to be hospitalised, need to be ventilated, and is at risk of death. Just being young is not going to be a protection for you. Just being young doesn't mean that you can be in any way foolhardy, that you can ignore the messages. The messages are there for everyone. And it is a major adjustment for the entire community. Our workplaces are different, our schools are different, our social lives are different. But it's just so very important that we all spread the word, don't spread the virus. We need to get the word out that it's just really important that no matter how tempting it might be to catch up with a few friends, this is not about what you can get away with. This is about what you can contribute to stopping the spread of the virus.
Absolutely. I'd like to reinforce that. I think, unfortunately, we did give young people some mixed messages to begin with. I don't blame them. I think that they did receive some pretty mixed messages, but it's quite clear. I'm aware today that there are a number of people in intensive care who are under 50. And I think that everyone can get very sick from this virus. So it's just very unpredictable. And it's not just about not spreading it, it's about not getting sick yourself and not inadvertently spreading it by doing something that you may think is just part of normal life. But unfortunately, we're living in a different world now.
Yeah, that goes to our next question, which is that with these current circumstances and restrictions in place, you know, set to last for anywhere up to 3 months, 6 months beyond, while it's really important to keep these social distancing measures and to listen to health advice from the government, what can we do in our own homes and connecting with other people to keep our morale up, to promote good mental health, which is also really important during this time? What are your suggestions? Dr. Freelander, we'll start with you again.
Okay, well, look, I think keeping in contact with people. I mean, Zoom is fantastic. I'm a devotee now. So really, I think it's fantastic. Skype is fantastic. The phone's fantastic. Just being able to call, your relatives. We've got very elderly relatives who we don't want to visit, obviously for obvious reasons. we can talk to them on the phone, and it's great to hear from them. That my wife has an aunt who was a nurse during the Second World War, and we were listening to her stories on the phone the other day about what the war was like, and I guess this is similar. But it was lovely to talk to her, and keeping in contact with our children and grandchildren. Our grandchildren can Skype us now, which is fantastic. So keeping in touch, and also I think if you're living with other people, you have to give people a bit of distance. You have to try and do things where you're not stuck in the one room together. I'm sure people who've been married a long time know about that, and making sure that you are doing positive things. We'll get through this. We will get through this. There will be another world out there at the end of all this. I think it'll be some months. It won't be weeks. And, it will be a different world. But we have to prepare for that as well. So it's a matter of doing what you can, using all the new technologies, and making sure you stay in contact with people. I've recently rung a couple of my parliamentary friends just to see how they're going. Because, it is a different world for us. This was a really strange, I'm sure Julian would agree, it's a strange weekend for me to have really no function to go to. So I'm dressed up tonight for this because...
Well, we're lucky. We're very lucky to have you. That's how we feel. Julian, do you want to add anything to morale boosting?
Yeah, Mike is right. Just keeping in touch with people is so important. The technology enables us to do that so well. I think Mike's also right when he says it's important to pick up the phone to those relatives that are not good with these technologies. My wife has both of her grandmothers, not great-grandmothers, still alive, both in their 90s, and we call them regularly on the phone, as well as, we use Skype and WhatsApp in terms of speaking to other relatives, my parents and my wife's parents. We've also found that because, like Mike and Kerryn, it's very rare that we have an evening at home generally as parliamentarians and councillors and the like, that at this time we've got a lot of time at home, and so we're actually speaking to people that we wouldn't see that often, but because there's the opportunity to be there, because we know they're there, because they know we're here, that there's a great opportunity to connect more than you would. Because this is an AUJS teleconference, Zoomcast, whatever you want to call it, I'm the least techie on the panel, I should say. I thought it was worthwhile mentioning something that was sent to me, and has probably been seen by many people in the Jewish community, is that great short thing with Natan Sharansky that was done. He talked about his time in captivity. He was one of he's been one of the great men fighting anti-Semitism around the world, but he was captured by the Soviets and held in prison as a political prisoner for, I think it was 7 years. And he talked about what he did to survive that. And the two things that he said that I think are most relevant to us is, one, think about the things that are bigger than yourself. Never forget you're part of, in his case, and in our case, part of a bigger cause, something that's bigger than yourself. Secondly, don't think about things that are beyond your control. So we don't know when coronavirus is going to end. So we shouldn't, hope, well, it's going to end tomorrow or it'll end on the 6th of October or whatever. We should think about the things we can control. So you can control whether you, in his case, learn to play chess or learn a new language or do something with your family. Everyone should set some tasks for this time that we have that is so different in our lives to achieve things. And that, I think, will help do great things for people's mental health.
I think that's really wonderful to reference that video, and we'll post that in the live feed now so people can go and look at that. I found that very boosting morale. Kerryn, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'm going to talk about a number of practical strategies that people can use to be able to get through this very great change in our lives. And the first thing we can do is to stop talking about social isolation and start talking about physical distancing, because you can be physically distant from someone without being socially isolated. And all of the things that Mike and Julian talked about in terms of reaching out to family, to friends, making new friends, These are the sorts of things that we can do to maintain social connections, which are really important to mental health. But each day, I think it's really important to set a daily routine for the next day, because all of our routines have been turned upside down. And we can get back a bit of a sense of control if we do set that kind of daily routine. Exercise is a really important part of that daily routine. It's been considered an essential reason for going outside, and provided again that you maintain physical distancing from people. And I support the CDC's recommendation about wearing a mask when you're outside. And I think that we'll probably start seeing some sewing bees for cloth masks around the countryside. Nutrition is really important. Don't sit around sort of eating junk food. I think it's important to be eating fresh fruit, vegetables, making sure that you're taking care of your diet even while you're changing. And of course, learning some new cooking skills as one of those opportunities. Learning to meditate, practicing some gratitude for the things that we do have rather than the things that we've lost. I think setting a new challenge. Gabby, I'm sure you'll be happy to report that you are honing your Scrabble skills during this time. And
who's winning, Kerryn?
I was going to say, this is my life currently. If anyone's wondering, just follow Kerryn's suggestions, and that's what I have to do every day before I go to sleep.
You can look at learning some new skills if you've always wanted to learn to play a musical instrument or learn a new language. Now is the time while you're at home to either do that on your own using an internet guide, or with family, or even with friends on a Zoom. Actually learning something together is something that you can do as well. So also try and see the opportunities in this rather than just the losses.
Thank you. Those are really encouraging words. So the next kind of question I want to turn to is an economic question. And there's been some discussion in our live feed about casual employees and their eligibility for the job keeper and potentially job seeker or New Start payments. So the direct question is, why do casual employees who have worked less than 12 months in their role not qualify for the JobKeeper program? We've heard today that there's union activism, I believe, for trying to incorporate those people who are missing out. What are your thoughts on this? What is it looking like? And what is the trajectory that we're planning to see economically for young people who are unemployed? And Julian, I think we'll start with you.
Well, I think these are really unprecedented times, and economically it's quite uncharted territory. We haven't had a downturn like this that's been influenced not by global economic forces but by health forces, and we don't really have a sense of how this is going to play out over the long term. The Prime Minister talks about at least 6 months. That I listen very carefully to him when he says that, so that means probably in the longer term. There are two main packages that the government has put forward. There's the job seeker package, which is effectively a supplement to New Start, or what used to be called New Start, to provide people who've lost their jobs with an opportunity to access higher payments given the state of the economy at this very, very challenging time. And then there's the JobKeeper payment. And the notion of the JobKeeper payment is about people trying to maintain relationships with their employers. Employers try to maintain some sense of business continuity as they go into hibernation. And the reason for this is that it is much better longer term for the economy. I think it's also much better for people's mental health. It's much better for the viability of the business if people maintain that relationship with their workplaces, and the workplace maintains a relationship with their employers. Anybody who's employed somebody who's good knows how hard it is to recruit people and how hard it is to retain people. So having a benefit that is paid to an employer and then passed through to the employee maintains that important employment relationship. Now, as for casual workers, if you have worked with a business for more than 12 months as a casual worker, you are eligible for the JobKeeper payment. And that was a decision that the government has made. I don't have access to all of the particular factors that or the Treasury economic modelling that the government would have taken into account in making that particular decision. But if you've been a casual worker and you've been working for a particular firm for 12 months or more, you are in effect part of the furniture. And I think this particular payment recognises that. It also, I should say, applies to people who run their own businesses, to sole traders. You don't just have to be part of a corporation, you can be part of a partnership, you can work for a trust. It takes on practically every corporate form except working for a state government or a state entity, and that's because we just don't have the constitutional power, I assume, for making those sorts of payments.
And just on that, as a follow-up, do you think there will be any measures, or will you be pushing for any measures to maybe incorporate these people who are currently missing out, i.e. people who are employed not by a private entity, or people who have worked for, say, 11 months or 10 months?
Well, I think one of the things that you've seen, because this is part of the, I think, third tranche of measures that the government has announced, is that each tranche of measures has been followed up by another tranche of measures that is designed to plug particular gaps that have been identified by the previous measure. And I know that myself because we have been, in my office, responding to constituents who've had inquiries about are they eligible for this, are they eligible for that, how does the particular payment work for them? And we've been feeding those through to Josh Frydenberg and to Matthias Cormann or to Greg Hunt if they're a health-related measure. And as we've seen iterations of the different packages come through, we've seen them made very much in response to things. So I don't want to be, I'm not the decision maker here. I don't want to be involved in saying, well, this will be in and that will be out. But it is interesting that as we've gone through these different iterations, each iteration seems to have responded to issues that have been identified by a previous iteration.
Thank you so much. Dr. Freelander.
Oh, look, thanks. This is a really important question about fairness and equity. I have a number of concerns. I'm very concerned, particularly at this time of year. We've had people who have left school or left university, finished their training, they've started work for a particular company, even if it's a casual work, they've been working up until now, and suddenly they're not eligible for the JobKeeper payment. I think that's very fair on young people who've just started their careers. So I think there's room to move there. Labor pushed very hard also for some of the allowances to be made available for people whose spouses earned more than the cut-off that the government have made. The government changed there in response to the Labor Party's request. So I think there's room to move here. And there's one really, really important issue that I think we need to really focus on and urgently need to help. And that's for students, overseas students who come here, who have in good faith paid money to be educated at our institutions, and yet are now being told they're no longer eligible for any form of welfare payment and can't get home because the borders have been closed. And I think we need to really help those people urgently because they really are struggling. The same as some visa holders who've come here to work in good faith, been given jobs in Australian companies, and suddenly they're not eligible for social benefits. And I think that's very unfair. And
do you believe that they should be going home to their country of origin, or what do you believe with that?
Well, I think there's two things. Number one, many of them can't get home because borders are closed. Number two, many of them will have jobs once this is over because their skills will be required. I'm particularly in areas like in engineering and mining and in lots of areas where their skills will still be required. So I think we need to, if we can, bend the rules a little and allow them to be eligible for social security benefits. This is particularly true for some of our New Zealand friends who've come here recently to work and aren't eligible for some of the social welfare benefits. And we know that we'll need those people once we're through this. So I think the system does need to be modified for those people just because of fairness and because of equity. Even though they may not be Australian citizens, they provide skills for us and to us, and we should support them just as on the basis of fairness.
Kerryn, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think that the support that the government has provided to people has really, I think, preserved a lot of people's mental health over this time, and I think it's been very important. But Mike makes an extremely important point that we need to now have a look at these measures, and that's why I'm quite pleased to see that Parliament's going to be returning to discuss some of these measures, because I think that there does need to be a debate around the edges and about where we go from here. And I think it's very important that these elements of economic stimulus are scrutinised and debated, so that we're getting the best possible package for our Australian community and for people, as Mike said, who are stranded here and need to either find work or to have some level of support if they're not able to get home. And so it's a very complicated thing. It's really landed in the lap of Australians, as it has in many other countries, quite unexpectedly. And I think that we've had to move extraordinarily quickly. And so now it's time to refine those measures.
Okay, on to a question regarding civil liberties, if you like. Governments around the world have taken very different approaches to the crisis, some perhaps more intrusive than others. How do we ensure that these extraordinary powers, which are currently being utilised by governments, do not have long-term impacts on our civil liberties? And when do you think this kind of discussion will be relevant to the debate?
Can I kick off with this? And I think each country is different. There were those appalling images on Four Corners a few weeks back of people being welded into their homes in China. And when you look at that, no democratic government would take the sort of measures that the Chinese Communist Party had taken in Wuhan province there. Australia has implemented a range of what are by our standards very tough, very draconian measures, particularly at the state level. I mean, you can be fined up to, I think it's $11,000 for public order offences for effectively failing to comply with the social distancing policies that the government has announced. Police officers can issue you a $1,000 on-the-spot fine. These are for offences, and there's a jail term of up to 6 months as well for failing to comply with these things. If having failed to comply with the $11,000 fine and your repeat offence, there's a further $5,000 fine for some of these offences. So these are usually for matters that in the ordinary course of things we would not regard as things that should be subject to the term of imprisonment of 6 months. And so I think it is very important that these measures last no longer than is necessary, and that what we should be doing is that when it is safe to do so, looking to repeal these sorts of measures, because they are here for an extraordinary set of circumstances that we find ourselves in, but they are not measures that should sit on the statute book for all time.
Yeah. Dr. Freelander.
Look, we live in extraordinary times. I never thought that I would ever live through a time where our borders would be closed, where we couldn't go from New South Wales to Queensland because the borders are closed. On the other hand, I've never heard a policeman say, I've got enough power, I don't need anything more. So I get very worried about giving extra powers to state or federal police forces. I've been very disappointed with the border protection policies that have been put in place. I think there are great dangers in giving more and more power, particularly to the federal police. And I think that there is a great danger in the way that Parliament is really only being recalled to rubber stamp legislation. And I think that it would have been much better if Parliament could work in a way that would allow proper oversight of what is happening at a federal level. And I also think at state level as well, because don't forget we have very minimal sitting of state and federal parliaments. So I am very wary about this. I think we live in strange, unusual times, and we need some way of maintaining public order in these special times. But I'm very worried that there appears to be very little oversight of some of the police actions. Although, you know, in Australia, I think we're lucky that we have police services that generally do the right thing. I have been concerned by some of the power that the federal police have had for things like raiding journalists in terms of, you know, we've already had a trial in the ACT where there was no public oversight. So I am very wary of these police powers, and I think it would be much better if Parliament had better oversight of this. I'm not a lawyer, but I do think our civil liberties in this most trying of times are really at risk.
Mm. Thank you. Thanks for that. Kerryn, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, Gary, I think those are all important comments, and obviously nobody wants to see these measures in place for a moment longer than they're absolutely necessary, because Australians want to go about their lives as soon as possible, and it wasn't working on a voluntary basis. And that's why these laws were necessary. From the point of view of being a doctor, and I'm sure Mike will attest to this, we are blessed with the gift of foresight. And that comes from many years of training, from seeing a patient with health risk factors and being able to see into their future and know exactly what's going to happen to them if they don't change certain behaviours. And so the medical profession, and particularly those of us working at the coalface, were seeing quite some weeks ago what needed to be done. And these very draconian measures, I think arguably may not have been necessary if those measures had been taken much earlier. If these social distancing measures had been recommended, if border control had been more stringently applied, if there'd been screening of people coming in from Europe and the United States at an earlier stage, if the cruise ship hadn't been landed. But we don't have the luxury of being able to say this is what should have happened at this point. We have to just say this is where we are, this is where we need to be in the foreseeable future. And unfortunately, we have needed these more draconian measures in order to limit the spread to save lives. That's how important these measures are. And so I don't think anybody wants to see them go on any longer than they need to. We have got lessons from countries overseas where this situation has been used by authoritarian governments to increase their powers and reduce democracy. And that's what we must guard against.
Yeah, I agree.
So now on to a question that Julian touched on prior, which was that there are particularly communities where there is more disadvantage in Australia at the moment who are suffering a lot more than perhaps other communities. How can we make sure that our response doesn't cause unforeseen harm to people who are living in unsafe homes at the moment?
Would you like me to start on that?
Well, I think this is... Oh, sorry. No,
Mike,
go, Mike, you go.
To you, Julian.
No, Mike, please.
Look, I think that social disadvantage is compounded by any form of health crisis. And I think this is particularly true in the times of the COVID-19. And we look at things like housing. We've briefly touched on education. Some of the schools in my electorate, many of the families struggle. And it's all very well for me to say the schools should be closed, but I'm aware also that many of those kids don't have access to the internet at home, etc. And that puts them again at an educational disadvantage. There are some really significant housing issues amongst disadvantaged groups in my electorate, particularly Indigenous families and people with mental illness and people who both parents have suddenly lost their jobs, or single parent families. And we need to be aware of all those issues, and we need to support those people as best as we can. The primary issue for me is housing, because if you don't have a stable house, all those other issues of education, health, etc., are not able to be dealt with. So I think we're already facing a housing crisis in Australia, and I think this has compounded that. And I'm very worried about what's going to happen to some of those people. And I think the government has tried to do some good things, but I think much more needs to be done, particularly in terms of housing for disadvantaged people. I think that there are other areas where people have struggled, access to healthcare, and I think the government has done really terrific things with telehealth now, and really upscaled that and allowed people much better access to health advice. And I think that's been a really, really positive thing. Some of the other issues that we need to talk about are things like type 2 diabetes, concentrating on how we can help people who have risk factors get healthier before the real onslaught comes. So all those sort of things need to happen, and I think the government has tried its best, but I do think there's a lot more that needs to be done in providing people with stable housing, and that should start immediately. Thanks.
Julian.
I think that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of Australians who are accessing benefits for the first time in their life. Australians who've never gone on to Services Australia website or Centrelink or engaged with them, or never even thought that they would have anything to do with those organisations, having to access those for the first time ever. And I think that is a huge thing across our society, whether you're in an electorate like Mike's, which is quite socially disadvantaged, or an electorate like the one that Kerryn used to represent, which is at the other end of the scale, or mine, which is a bit more in the middle. Australians of all walks of life are feeling the effect of this, and the effect of this is because of the measures that we've had to take. I mean, the effectively closing down of a whole range of businesses, and the closing down of the way we do a range of businesses has had serious effects on people, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. I think perhaps the question that you're asking, Gabby, really gets to the question of people who are having to self-isolate in families that are vulnerable, and the people are vulnerable because the family is dysfunctional. We're thinking of domestic violence and sexual abuse and the like. And one of the things that I know that the government has put in place is a $150 million package to deal with this issue while people are having to socially distance. Spatially isolate, I think. I liked Kerryn's description, actually. What was the phrase you used,
distancing.
Kerryn? Physical distancing. Thank you, Kerryn. While people have to physically distance themselves. And some of that goes to increased crisis accommodation. I don't think we can ever have too much crisis accommodation for people who are engaged and try to flee from an abusive relationship. Personal safety always has to come first, in my view. We've got obviously things like the helpline 1-800 RESPECT. We've got things like Men's Link and the like to help people deal with some of the issues that they're facing as a result of unemployment. There's the extra money that's been given to Beyond Blue, Lifeline and Kids Helpline to deal with particularly some of the challenges that are coming out of the coronavirus situation and people's economic and other circumstances that they find themselves in. But I think there's a particular challenge for people in vulnerable households, and that's why additional accommodation is so important at this time.
And something I'll just add there as well is the child protection industry. I mean, a lot of social workers who have to do at-home visits would obviously be affected by the measures that are being put in place about two persons gatherings. And I'm not quite sure about the legislation regarding that, but that might be something else which we need to start thinking about, because children are often the most vulnerable in these situations as well.
Could I just add something there, Gabby? Those are all really important points that Julian and Mike have both made. And I think that it's really important that we also add another factor, and that is we've been talking about people in unsafe households, and we also need to think about people who don't have a household.
Yes.
We need to talk about people who are couch surfing, who can't socially isolate, people who are currently experiencing homelessness. We know that there's been an outbreak amongst backpackers, for example, in the eastern suburbs. And if they have a coronavirus infection and they can't get home, what are we going to do to enable those people to self-isolate so that we limit the spread? But also, how do we facilitate those people getting home or indeed staying here? Because many of the backpackers, of course, lost their casual employment And if their temporary accommodation is stopped and the hostel's shut and they can't go back to a room with 8 or 10 people in a dormitory, then we have to, think very carefully about that, because what we're going to do is to then see another spike amongst the backpacker community who aren't able to establish households where they are able to have a room to themselves. And of course, we need to increase our efforts in terms of crisis accommodation, refuges, which many of which have been closed down. So for people who are in violent relationships who need to be able to escape, and at the moment may not be able to, and that again increases the risk of homelessness. And of course, the people who are currently experiencing homelessness, to be able to, I think we need to get a lot more inventive about how we go about providing accommodation for people so that they can stay safe during this very difficult time.
Okay, so I think to our final question, as a all Jewish panel and broadcasting from the AUJS platform, we have Pesach approaching on Wednesday. Obviously, this crisis across the world is going to see a huge shift in how we celebrate Pesach, and then how we also commemorate things like Yom HaShoah, which are in the preceding weeks. I know AUJS is going to be rallying around some Seder opportunities, and I work for an organization called Youth Here, which is going to be doing some online commemoration for Yom HaShoah. Do you, as the leaders and wiser elders of our community, have any suggestions or creative ideas other than just like, the normal Zooming your family that we may want to take up? I'll let anyone answer.
I think one of the first things that we can do is to acknowledge that there will be a sense of grief and loss over not being able to celebrate Pesach with family in the way that we normally would. But I think we also have to remember that with diaspora, many of us do have family who are overseas and can't always be together at this time. And think about how you might celebrate with people who are in other countries. So we are going to have to, I think, do things differently this time around, using the social media platforms to, for example, with the prayers and with some of the rituals of Pesach might be quite important, and find out if your shul has live streaming for some of the services to make you feel as if you are connected with your religious community as well. These are some of the things that I've been thinking through about how to observe Pesach this year.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll speak next if I can. Are you there? Sorry.
Yes, go for it. Go for it. Eager to hear.
I'm not particularly religious, I have to say, and I think though that there are some really important lessons in these rituals, and the first is that we are a resilient people. Human beings are resilient. We have gone through terrible things in the past through the ages, and we've survived. And so I think it's important to take those lessons to mind. We will get through this. It may take 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, even longer, but we will get through this, and there will be a civil society at the end of it. And, we need to prepare for that as well as deal with what's happening now. I think it is very tough on old people, because older people have seen the rituals, they've seen the things that have happened regularly over time. And I think we need to think very much of our older people. We need to get them more involved with teaching the younger kid about the rituals of our. So that's really important. That the lessons are there for us to see of resilience and survival, not just the Jewish people, but all people. And that's something that should carry us forward. We live in uncertain times. The only book on economics I ever read was The Age of Uncertainty by J.K. Galbraith, the famous American economist. And there's lots of lessons in that, that we live in uncertain times. We need to be resilient. We need to get through it, and we need to cope with it in a way that the Jewish rituals will help us deal with that are very important, particularly for our older people and for our young people coming through. I don't have any magic ideas. I think Zoom is magic to me. The fact that we have access to these sort of technologies is just a tribute to human ingenuity as far as I can see. So, you know, we are lucky that we have these opportunities. We are lucky that we live in a place like Australia. We are lucky that you know, wiser heads than mine have prepared us for this. So we need to concentrate on the future and on the positives. And I think the Jewish rituals will help us do that. And there's, look, you know, as I say, I'm not very religious, but I remember the stories around Pesach and, you know, how all the different foods had a meaning, and you know, it was really something important in my early upbringing. And so we can learn a lot from it, and we'll get through it. And I'm very grateful that I live in a place like Australia that we can get through it. So that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Well, Mike has hit on the centrality of what we're doing at the Seder. I mean, the Haggadah is all about the telling of our story between generations, and I think that is the hardest part of what we're missing out on. I have a 2-year-old who absolutely adores his grandparents and great-grandparents, and for them not being able to be in the same room as him will be difficult. But as the Haggadah tells us, it's not just the exodus from Egypt. It was the time where in the Middle Ages we weren't able to practice our religion freely and openly, and there's the discussion about all the sages. We wonder why are we having these discussions about the sages? The whole nature of the Haggadah is it's supposed to get us to ask questions. It's a telling of a story from the perspective of a child who's asking those 4 questions at the beginning of Manishtana, and then the adults explain. And of course we have that that bit of the Haggadah that says, you know, in every generation somebody has risen up against us, but the Holy One, blessed be He, has kind of relieved us from their hands, and that is true. It's also true in a particular context of this year's Seder that the Halakma Anya prayer, one of the early things that we do on Seder night, you know, this is the bread of affliction that our fathers ate in Egypt. All those who are needy, let them come and celebrate the Passover with us. All those who are hungry, let them come and celebrate the Passover with us. With Zoom, there's no reason why you can't have 500 people celebrating the Passover with you. Look on the bright side, you know, it's not just the 20 people you can fit around your dinner table. There's a great opportunity there. We should also remember how that prayer ends, you know. This year we are slaves, next year may we be free men. This year we're here dealing with Corona. Hopefully by the time of the next Seder, we will be through it. And this will be a Seder that I think all of us will remember for generations, and we will tell our families and our children about it. I think in some respects it's going to be a richer Seder for having, in a weird way, being a stranger in a strange land. We're in this environment, we're Zooming, you know, instead of one family coming together and, you know, you've got your 20-odd people who come to your home and you've got one set of matzo ball soup, there's perhaps 6 or 7 sets of matzo ball soup that are being made around and everybody's gathered together, and it's a bit more disjointed. And going through the trial and tribulation of this, I think, will actually help prompt more questions and help us come more together as a people, and I think that's a great thing.
Thank you so much, Julian. That was a very, very uplifting answer. In fact, all of your answers were so uplifting, and I feel so privileged to be able to have hosted all 3 of these incredible panelists tonight. Thank you so much for giving your time. I know that everyone who has streamed in also greatly appreciates it. I feel a lot more reassured. I think I won't be having as many coronavirus nightmares tonight. So thank you so much. Enjoy your Sunday night with your family. Happy Pesach, and look forward to next Q&AUJS.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gabby.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Kerryn.
Thanks, Julian and Mike.
Pleasure to be on with you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good night.